This is Mr. Pymerica's 20th Century Game Controller Collection. This is as many as I could actually fit into a photograph, so I just decided to stomp it in the 20th century. Hopefully someday I'll be able to make a photo, video of 21st century controllers that I've owned, which is about a whole lot more than that. Not exactly sure how many. About 50 more from the 21st century I have. Alright, starting with the Zircon Video Command Joystick. This is released in 1982 by a company that bought out the rights to produce the Fairchild Channel F, the first cartridge-based system. Came out a year before 2600 in 1976. That's why this is at the beginning. So it's essentially the same controller, just with removed functionality. On this actual controller, you push down for your fire button, and you move the joystick around. Typically you use two hands. You can use just your thumb, but I have to hold the camera. You move it around. There's a spring inside that lets you push down. Very smooth, moves real easy. Functionality removed that was actually in the Fairchild was a pull up, which it still physically does, and a twist left, twist right. You would use in the Fairchild system in the Channel F to rotate paddles. So you could do like a Pong type game with angles, and angle the paddles. But only the plunger down fire button works. Since it's essentially the same controller with less functionality, exactly the same, just got a sticker on the front. That's at the beginning of my list. We have 1977's Atari launch controllers. The driving controller, which has an endless spinner. You just spin it as long as you want. Only one game was programmed for it. I have the 1978 version, which has the word driving instead of the Atari logo. We have the paddle controllers, also 1978 versions. 77 versions have the Atari logo instead of the word paddle, and the paddles, they stop at some point. Tried to clean this one out with nail polish because it didn't have rubbing alcohol, because it was jittering and it discolored it. Still didn't work too well. Still pretty jittery. Then we have the Atari video touchpad. Same functionality as the kids controller and the keyboard controller. Has rubber buttons, 12 of them. Came with the game Star Raiders. It had an overlay. I bought mine for maybe $1 or so. It's the cheapest controller available on Amazon. It did not come with the overlay. We have the Gemstick by Gemini. Very good feeling controller. I think it's better than the original 2600 controller, which I did have years ago, and that felt very sort of rubbery stiff to me. And this is a Gemini controller box. I have two of them. I had ordered some controllers from Atari2600.com, and they accidentally also sent me someone else's order, which was of two Gemini sticks. So I got those for free, essentially. This is a Rockland Unroller controller. It's not a trackball. It's a dome that clicks in the various directions. Left, right, up, down. Works pretty good. You can use your palm. You can do it one-handed if you want to. You can go one-handed with it. Just depending on how intense the game you're playing is. This is the RGA video joystick. Uniquely has a sheath that you rock around into. You rock the controller. It's got a flat button on top. The grip is the same grip as the original QuickShot controller. We have the Atari 7800 controllers, also known as the Proline joysticks. Personally, I think they're the least comfortable controllers as far as using the buttons. In emulation, you can hook them up to the PC. You can remap everything and basically hold them in any direction you want, which is cool. The joysticks are very good, very smooth. They notch in, and obviously the metal paneling is really cool. Got the NES controller from '85. It's a QuickShot joystick from 1987. Clicks really well. It's based off of the QuickShot 2, which was released for the basically DB9 systems, is the Atari-like and home computer systems. It was originally designed in '84. A lot of people ripped off this joystick top for their Atari controllers. Same thing with the other QuickShot grip, which they obviously ripped them off. That's on the QuickShot. This NES Max. It's actually originally designed by Bulletproof Software. In Japan, it was released as the BPS Max. This is called the Cycloid. When you slide around like this, nothing happens. You have to push down while you're sliding it, and that'll get your directions going. Or you could even just independently press this black wheel, well, not wheel, but this black circle, and go whatever direction. SNES controller sort of took some cues from this with its 4 buttons and the slanted start and select. It's a QuickShot 126 joypad. The box was labeled as a deluxe joy card controller. Never played a television controller before, but it has a similar, I imagine it's something like this. It's basically just a D-pad in a sense that is a circle. It's real smooth. If you have a smaller thumb, wouldn't wear out your fingers. It's fine. You remap it on a PC for emulation. You can use this as like a pawn controller up and down, just for simple ones. Space shooters, Galaxian, go back and forth. It's actually starting to select on this, but it's just smooth back and forth thing that you can do. And it's sort of got buttons that are like a stopwatch. Lots of cats walking through. Stopwatch-like buttons. And you can put it in any orientation you want if you remap it for a PC. Sort of strange in its original orientation. Cord comes out of the bottom, which is peculiar as well. Sort of draining the casting in that way. We move on to 1991's QuickShot Flight Grip. I have the NES version. Very sharp D-pad, but sharp. It's actually concave somewhat. So if you get it in the right spot, it's not too bad. It does feel cool, even though it offers nothing new. It's got the trigger in the back. If you turn it like this, bam, you got yourself a Wiimote, basically. You got your big button, your D-pad, right there, and you got a trigger button under here, like the trigger on the Wiimote. Again, with emulation, you can move it like that. You could map it that way. It's not. You see, it's sort of boomerangy. It also has the conjoined button, which the other QuickShot controllers do as well. That one's more rocky on the joystick. Joystick is called the QuickShot 12 on the NES. It's SN Pro Pad. Very, very good. I prefer this D-pad to the Genesis pad. I used to own an SNES controller, but I do not anymore. The original, so I can't say how they compare. Has a slow motion button on the back. You can switch back and forth. It's cool. It's see-through. one of the early see-through controllers, because this came out in 1991, same year the SNES launched. Maybe the first see-through controller, the first one I can think of. Got some yellowing on the cord, tribute to its system, I guess. It's a turbocharged 360, released in 1992. People complain about it online, but I think it's pretty good. The worst part about it is you can't rest your thumb on the actual item, so you have to sort of hover the whole time, which is annoying. I actually beat Cave Story on the Wii, obviously using an adapter, with this controller. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was great for Cave Story, aiming diagonally, great for diagonal aiming. It's got notches for little circles for diagonal and lines for up, down, left, right. Makes it so you can feel where you're at, which in that sense makes it better than like you'd find on a touchscreen phone today. You have a little bit of feel to it. You don't have to look at it. And it's essentially, as much as people criticize it, it's essentially the same thing as most people play games today on their Android or iOS phones. This is a game handler, ultra rare Genesis version. One-handed controller. It's a motion controller. I don't have the plug hooked into the bottom. It's got a slot for a plug. It was also released for the NES. It's got wonderfully designed one-hand controller. You've got your pinky right here. You got your trigger. This is the start button up here. Then you have another button here. I think that's the start button. I forget. I remap everything, you know. I'm pretty sure that is. And then you can change settings, turbo, switch which A and B, whether you want one to be A or the other to be B. Is good for the real system. These are Genesis controllers. They're here. Appearing in 1992, because this is the 1992 versions. The 1989 versions have red lettering. They don't have ABC up here. The trigger is above. The trigger wording is above. There's no little plastic nub on the B button on the original versions. And the reason I have them in 82 is because the D-pad is actually made differently than the 89 version, so they are different controllers, even though they're mostly the same except for cosmetically. The D-pad does have a different feel. It's a QuickShot 3+3 for the Genesis. Very good clicky arcade style joystick. Buttons light up if it were plugged in. It's got a mode start. I cannot get this to work with any 6-button adapters, but it works 3-button fine. And you can turn the buttons. You can turn the button base, rotate the buttons however you like. It's also got programmable buttons, 2 programmable buttons, these blue ones. And it's got a reverse button. I forget exactly what that does, but I believe you can program a move and then it does it in reverse. Essentially, you do the Hadouken to the left, it'll do it to the right, which is pretty cool. It's Konami Justifier for Genesis. Fighter Stick SN for the SNES. Real non-clicky, smooth joystick. You can change your speed of your turbo here. Nice buttons. Moving to 1993, the Jaguar controller. I think it's a very comfortable controller. It's not confusing, nothing like that. The worst part about it is these buttons are a bit, the plastic just doesn't feel good. The grip is amazing. You can just put all your fingers down there, put your index right there. D-pad is better than I remember when I picked it back up. Then you have overlays over the number button part, which is fantastic. Most games on the system don't use the numbers. Some of them do, but as you can see, you can select your weapons with one button push. You don't have to cycle through. You got a map. On the Jaguar, if you press pound and star, it does reset without having to get up and press reset. That's an awesome feature you don't hear much about. You got the nice logo. The overlays were awesome, especially for first-person shooters, even though it's basically only two that I know of. But those are the best games for the system anyway. It's the Capcom Pad Soldier SNES version. Not even SNES, Super Famicom. Super cool because basically you got your D-pad here, and it's hard to disconnect the pin. And on the other side, like an arcade stick, you can use your fingers instead of having to use your thumb, so you can have all three fingers down for fighting games. Very cool. Nice grip. Nice grip. Released only in Japan. It's my only Japan exclusive controller. It's a Logitech TurboTouch 360 Plus. It actually has a plug that lets it play on the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. It's actually just an adapter that goes from Genesis to Super Nintendo. Not made by the original TurboTouch company Triax. It's funny that these two ended up lining up. It's made by Logitech. There was a Logitech controller with a normal D-pad released before this, but Logitech got the TurboTouch, so they let them have this. They made that controller into a TurboTouch controller. It's got L and R on the side, both L and R over here, or X and or Y and Z. 3 programmable buttons, pre-programmed for Street Fighter moves. I believe one of them is a Hadouken. One's a shorter Yuken, I believe. It's getting hard to get in the middle here. The Saturn Virtual Stick. I basically got it because it's got essentially 5 buttons in a row, which is unique. This L being half a button wears on your thumb. I'd say the worst part about it. It's got variable turbo control. The stick feels really good. It's not a clicky stick, but it's nice and smooth. This Virtual Boy controller, I actually have an adapter called the Bliss Box that lets you play with that on the PC. It's got triggers on the back. Triggers that I wish we'd see more often on systems. Little button triggers. It's got the 2 D-pads. It's a rare but cheap on Amazon Doc's Memory Joypad. It's essentially the combat controller, which was a controller designed for Mortal Kombat 2 and 3, but with its own programmable RAM cart that sort of looks like a Game Gear cartridge. Bottom connector is obviously not the same. You can program and save your moves to that cartridge, and I forget how many characters. I think it's 8 to 16 characters you can program 4 functions for. The first time I programmed it, worked fantastic. Second time, it seemed like it had a timing problem. But this came out after the Combat 3 pad, which is very similar but doesn't have the programming portion. It's like a cross between the Combat 3 pad on the Genesis and the Combat pad on the PlayStation, which has this programmable area here. The PS1 controllers, this is the second version. Second version has this fertile bead on the wire, and I believe the cable's longer. These are the SCPH 1080. Nothing to do with HD. That's why they're a little bit past the line. I don't know. I guess they're in the right spot either way. This is a Namco Nikon. It's got one analog trigger. The other one is a button, not analog. These are analog buttons. A lot of PlayStation controllers map as if they were the Nikon. They're very smooth analog buttons. And you twist the controller to steer. Very smooth, feels good. It's a good feeling controller. I'll have other controllers that map to the Nikon style. It's the Sony analog joystick. I believe that's the name. Some may call it the flight stick. The official box name is the analog joystick. Came out before the DualShock. This came out in April of '96. very well designed. Very smart having the arcade style buttons here as duplicates to the buttons on the actual sticks. Got the buttons there. Got an armrest, handrest on the bottom, fantastic. It's got a trigger back here on this side and another button down there. So push button with your pinky, have two buttons to press with your thumb, one with your trigger finger. This is a hat switch D-pad, designed the same, mirrored for the other hand. Otherwise, very, very fun. Gives you a fun experience, immersive experience. Here we have the Saturn controller. It's a 1996 is when the US version of this was released. My brother had the original Saturn US controller. That's why this isn't before PlayStation controllers, because the Japanese version, which is this one, the original, it's not released until 1996 in the US, mid-96. Favorite trigger buttons of all time. Sort of just have this awesome arch to them that just fits right. Very, very easy to push. Very fast as well. Sort of has a mouse feel, but doesn't have that click back to where it hurts your finger. It's a Saturn 3D joypad. With the adapter I have from RAFnet, you can actually use the D-pad and the analog knob here at the same time. For separate functions. You couldn't do that on the original Saturn. You had to switch this button back and forth. All these buttons are the same size here. So on the regular Saturn, they're different size. It has analog triggers like the Dreamcast controller. This comes unplugged, which is possible they might eventually, if it was successful, they may have added a rumble feature to this where you could plug it in. This uses magnets on the inside, so it basically doesn't wear out like the N64 joystick. It's real smooth, fantastic to play with Knights. I bought Knights, and I did not have the 3D Saturn 3D controller. My sister had it. They didn't have Knights. It's officially called the Saturn 3D control pad. Sega controllers tend to be called control pads. This is the Raccon. Hard to do internet searches. They think you're looking for a raccoon. It's RC style. Could not get this to work with anything but my Bliss box. No other PS2 adapter would work with it. Got the buttons down there. Forward, backwards, brake, gas. Steering is very good. This wheel is worn out. Mine was fresh box, never used, but this thing just, I guess in storage or whatever, the rubber is going down really quick. I thought the steering was fantastically accurate on this. Much more so than a lot of other driving controllers. This is a black SNE N64 original controller. Box is in Nintendo 64 black controller's official box name. You have the PS Arcade. I had to solder this to fix it on the inside, but one of the buttons came loose. It's the most arcadey feel of them all, I think. Buttons are sort of smooth and clacky. These light up if you have turbo on. This is I forget the name at this time, but basically your arcade style joystick where it pushes against the things on the inside. Forget the terminology for it. Hat switch. No, can't remember right now. I do know it, I just don't remember. Then we have the Jog-Con, released for Ridge Racer R4, I think. Has a wheel that you use to steer. Eventually it does have a hidden centering point, even though it twists forever. It has like a hidden centering point. Hidden just because you can't feel it. You just sort of have to go past it in the game, and it screws up the game. It's released in May 1999. But that's me accidentally skipping because of where it was at. Let's jump back to 96. Yeah, Arcade Shark. The only 9 face button, I think it's 9, yeah, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Only 9 face button arcade stick I know of. Used this to play Knights on the Wii. Very good. This is an analog, actually the only analog arcade stick I know of. They only come with one of these. It screws off and can go on this one. This is the D-pad, digital. This is actually analog right here. Only analog and digital arcade stick I have ever heard of. Big giant start button. SuperPad 64 Plus. It's got a Z trigger on the bottom, right under there. Analog stick is not very good, but the design is pretty cool. It shows you what N64 probably could have been if they had decided to go with just a two-prong. Generic Barracuda. This was released before the DualShock, but after the original Sony non-DualShock analog. If you look that up, you'll find out that happened. It has various modes. One of them that makes it possible to use in flight stick mode. One's in the other analog mode. Joysticks are very N64 like how they're made. They feel smooth, but ultimately this controller is very uncomfortable. I wish there were more controllers with buttons like this on the back, except for the fact that this one's very sticky and uncomfortable. I opened this up and it actually, these buttons rock both directions, like it has 2 contacts to where you can do left or right, but even with cleaning and everything, it just does not feel right. It's very clacky. These move really smooth just from feeling it, but in game it doesn't go well. There's the actual DualShock. We know enough about that, I guess. This is the 200 toy double trimmer. I'd say this is worse. If you're going to actually use an analog balls, these do click as well. They're textured sort of like the Rock 100 roller. If you're going to use these, they still have the grips designed as if you were going to use the analog sticks. And just using these for just a couple of minutes, having it low down for whatever reason, just kills your thumb. I'd say it's the worst controller I own. It's got a cool plug though. Worse than the 7800. Brings pain faster than that. That's hard to do. This is the glove for the N64. You got your D-pad on top. You wear this. You can access 7 buttons. Well, even more than that actually. And on your hand, you can access all the buttons. Just your fingers. You can show that. It's got the triggers there. Triggers in Z on the side, which is really cool. If the D-pad were better, it sort of doesn't feel centered right to where your thumb's at. Should be a great emulation controller as far as single-handed. This joint here controls the analog stick. Wears your wrist out very fast. I've even heard that from people with good wrists. This is the Osciware Spear 360 for PlayStation. It's got several modes that you can get it to work. It's got just one side of shoulder buttons, the other 2 on the face. What's interesting about this, it's got an analog ball that you can twist left, twist right, twist up, pull up, pull down, push down, pull up, and I believe there may be a few other functions as well. It's meant to simulate a head, sort of like you're looking certain directions, inverted. You pull down, you twist down to look up, twist the other way. Well, you twist left and right as well. It's meant to sort of emulate a head and how you look with a camera. It's more than just, I think it's 6-axis. It's more than just a single. It doesn't just simulate a single joystick. It goes beyond that. Aside from also adding the buttons. But what's interesting to me is that it's essentially very much like this, the Fairchild Channel F controller. Got the twist left, twist right, plunge down, plunge up, move around. This is insanely superior. This is unbelievably sensitive. Pretty much impossible to play games with. just as little movement as there is in this. The idea that it's ultra sensitive is absurd. You shouldn't have something with tiny movement available and have so much sensitivity. Never tried any writing Mario 64 on it though. I might try that. See how Mario's run to crawl, how easy it is to do. That's just a good analog. Mario 64 is a good thing to just test analog controllers on for, you know, the walking real slow to running. Already accidentally talked about the Jog-Con. That's from 1999. We've got the Ultra Racer. Very recentery. Pretty fun. See, we have the 1-2, which is reminiscent of the Neg-Con because it's based on that control scheme. These buttons actually say 1-2, the non-blue ones. So it's got analog buttons that you can use, which I don't believe the N64 version does. It's got more analog than the N64 version because of the dual. Then you have your gas brake. Pretty good. I think this is a Microsoft Freestyle Pro Sidewinder. Go check my list real quick. That's Sidewinder Gamepad Pro. It's from 1999. USB controller. USB used to have this cool looking plug. It actually gave you a little nub on top to let you know, hey, this is the top. Plug it in this way. The USB is my least favorite plug pretty much ever. It's easy to plug in and out, but it's very hard to figure out up and down, you know, which part's the top, and you're constantly flipping it. But back in the old days, USB controllers had the little nub on them. So here on another Sidewinder, same thing. I got a controller from 2000s like that, non-Microsoft one. See, here's a wheel that has it. Little thing on top lets you know. This is got triggers on the back. Nice feeling triggers. They're digital buttons, but this is a combination D-pad analog pad. Just strange. Registers as both. You can get it working in the modern day. Sort of like you push it a little bit and it's analog. You push it real hard, it turns to a digital button. I guess sort of like the even though you don't feel a click. Sort of like the GameCube controller. Feels good. I'd use it more, except for it's got these plastic direction indicators that stick up and are sharp and they hurt your thumb. These are Dreamcast controllers based on the Saturn 3D pad. You got the analog triggers in the back. Very plasticky button there. Very smooth D-pad, but something about it just doesn't feel great. Buttons are plasticky. Played through Shenmue with these and tons of other games, and I didn't. Aside from having to hold the trigger to run, they were still really comfortable, even though the plastics are kind of clacky and a little bit weird. Dreamcast keyboard, 2nd edition. I used to own the 1st edition. I had the box for that, but it was in the shed and got all stinky. It's a Quantum fighter pad for the Dreamcast. You can reprogram Z and C to anything except for L and R. It's got turbo for everything. This analog stick has something about it that lets you run faster. In the original Sonic Adventure, people used to get high scores on the old web leaderboards that was built into the game that let you access the web leaderboards through the game way back in 99. This controller's from 99. You could also do it, and I've tested this out, you can do a jump and hit the analog button and it like makes you jump farther in the game. So it's cool. It's really cool. For the first Sonic Adventure, it's sort of like a cheat controller. But it's also awesome that you can reprogram any of these, but C and C you can reprogram, and that's really cool for fighting games and other things. Dreamcast fishing controller, just a grip on the bottom. The reel's good. Sega bass fishing, fantastic. Sega marine fishing, fantastic. Sega bass fishing 2, a bit harder and more complicated. It plays pretty similar, just not as easy to pick up. but Sega just was fantastic at making arcade games, and this is a really fun controller. It's got motion control. Use the cast off. I haven't tried it with Virtual Tennis, even though I have a game, but I have tried it with Soul Calibur, and yes, if you slice down, you do the vertical slice. If you go sideways, you do the horizontal slice. It's fantastic. Early secret motion control that was built into the game by the kind people that made it. It's another Microsoft Sidewinder, the Dual Strike, the clicky D-pad. It's real nicely feeling back triggers. I got shift button here, which works as a normal button if you don't have the programming, if you don't have the old outdated remapping software. You use X-Padder to just make that a shift button, or just a regular button. Those buttons there, which are a little weird but still pretty cool. These buttons feel fine. The feature of it, can't really do it with one hand, but moves on this ball. Problem is you can't move both ways at once. It's basically move left, move this direction or that direction. You can sort of do it both ways at once, but there's a point where it just doesn't work, and it's really hard. Some people said they've been able to get good aiming with that, first-person shooters and such. I wasn't able to get much good doing with it, but something worth trying and something worth revisiting. This is the Microsoft Sidewinder wheel, obviously USB. It's got a grip that lets you hook it up to a table, which is fantastic. Makes it so it's totally sturdy. You can, because of this extra area at the bottom, you can actually fit it in your lap, short hold with your knees, and not have much problem. But it feels fantastic on a table. It's got 6 buttons on the front, little clicker buttons on the back. Very, very, very good. Best wheel I have, I'd say. And I probably only have 1 or 2 more, but still. And these are pedals, only pedals I have for any racing controller. Hooks up to these. These were also used for later Sidewinder wheels. They used the same pedals when they started designing new wheels. These last two, I'm not totally sure if they were released in the 20th century, as in 1999 or before, but some people would argue that the 20th century ended in 2000. I actually have the box for this. It's the color jolt pad. It's got a built-in rumble. It's got just one slot. It's for Dreamcast. One slot for VMU. I hadn't tried putting a rumble pack in the front. See what happens. But got a very unique 6-button layout. Almost vertical. Very unique. These buttons act as L&R up here, which is good. Buttons feel really good. Got the Dreamcast style sticks. Very good feeling controller. It has a 4 and 6 button mode. You can turn the rumble on and off. Some games it won't work in some modes, as far as emulating L&R, and this fixes it. It's the only one I know that has a switch for that. But there are no real Dreamcast games in a true 6-button mode. It's either programmable like that one, or it emulates L&R like that, or like this final one, it also emulates L&R. It's got a good feeling stick. It's a Nyko Dream Master. This Dream is greater than Master. It's got turbo, which I love. I wish this had turbo. Very unique layout as far as the ZNC. Feels good. You can use them. You can get them like this to do L&R, gas and brake. If you don't feel like doing the trigger, your fingers are wore out, and you don't really care about going a little slower on the gas. Problem with this one is the buttons are sort of stiff. Don't feel as good as any of the other Dreamcast controllers, but because of the turbo, because of the good layout of the ZNC, sometimes you don't want to use these harsh triggers. Makes it unique and worth it. This one doesn't have turbo, and the buttons aren't placed in a good spot, and this one has the Saturn style. But that's my controllers from the 20th century. It took me a long time to set all this out, like so I'm not going to move to the 21st century. This comprises of about 55 controllers. I'm not counting it right now. That's just based on my quick evaluation. Total, I have 104 controllers. Only 5 of them are duplicates. You know, double gem sticks, double 7800s, double Genesis, double PS1. Everything else is unique, and that's not counting Wii shells. Like I have the babysitting mama controller. That's just counting controllers that you can either plug straight into the console and it registers buttons, or you can hook an adapter up to the PC. There you go. Phone's ringing just at the end. Maybe see you for 21st century, don't know.